My name is Elaine, and at 54, I thought I knew my son completely. After raising Marcus alone since his father disappeared when he was just 8 years old, I believed we had built an unbreakable bond of trust and mutual respect. For 26 years, I poured everything I had into making sure he grew up to be a good man. I worked extra hours at the library, skipped vacations, and saved every penny I could for his education and future. Now, as I prepared for the knee surgery I had been postponing for years, I never imagined that the person I trusted most in this world would be the one to shatter everything. Sometimes the people closest to us surprise us in ways we never imagined possible. Before I share what happened, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Your support means the world to me, so if this story touches your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories of resilience and strength. Now let me tell you about the day my world turned upside down and how I discovered a strength I never knew I had. Working as an elementary school librarian for 28 years had given me more than just a steady income. It had taught me patience, the value of quiet observation, and how to nurture young minds with limited resources. My small salary meant that every dollar had to stretch, especially after my divorce when Marcus was 8, and his father simply vanished from our lives without a word or a penny of support. Those early years were brutal. I remember standing in grocery store aisles, calculating prices down to the cent, choosing generic brands over name brands, and explaining to a confused 8-year-old why we could not afford the cereals he saw in commercials. Our small 2-bedroom apartment was furnished entirely with pieces from thrift stores and garage sales, but I made sure it was always filled with books. Reading was free, and I wanted Marcus to understand that knowledge was the one treasure no one could ever take away from him. Every summer, while other families went on vacations, I worked additional jobs, tutoring struggling students and organizing library events. I sold my grandmother's jewelry piece by piece over the years whenever Marcus needed something important for school. When he wanted to join the computer club in high school, I worked evening shifts at a local diner for 3 months to pay the fees. When he needed a laptop for college applications, I gave up my annual eye exam and wore my old glasses for another year. But Marcus thrived despite our financial struggles. He excelled in school, particularly in mathematics and computer science. His teachers consistently praised his work ethic and natural intelligence. When he received a partial scholarship to the state university, I cried tears of pure joy and relief. Finally, all those sacrifices were paying off. After graduation, Marcus landed a position at a promising tech startup. He rented a nice apartment across town and seemed to be building a successful, independent life. Every Sunday, he would come for dinner, bringing flowers or small groceries, helping me figure out new technology updates on my aging computer and sharing stories about his work and his girlfriend, Sarah. Those dinners became the highlight of my week. I was so proud of the man he had become. Last Mother's Day, he surprised me with a beautiful bouquet of lilies and took me to lunch at the nicest restaurant I had been to in years. As we sat across from each other, I remember thinking that all those years of struggle had been worth it. He was talking about maybe proposing to Sarah soon, about wanting to give me grandchildren someday, about how grateful he was for everything I had sacrificed for him. I felt like I had finally succeeded as a mother. The chronic pain in my left knee had been building gradually over the past 5 years. Years of standing on library floors and climbing step stools to reach high shelves had taken their toll. What started as occasional stiffness became constant aching, then sharp pains that would shoot down my leg without warning. Climbing the 2 flights of stairs to my apartment became an ordeal that left me breathless and nauseated. 18 months ago, my doctor finally recommended total knee replacement surgery. The procedure would cost nearly $13,000, and my insurance would only cover 60% of the cost. That left me responsible for over $5,000 plus additional costs for physical therapy and recovery time off work. For someone living paycheck to paycheck, it might as well have been $50,000. But I was determined to have this surgery. I was 54 years old, and I wanted to enjoy my remaining active years without constant pain. I wanted to be able to play with those future grandchildren Marcus had mentioned. I wanted to travel, maybe take that trip to Ireland I had always dreamed about. Most importantly, I wanted to wake up in the morning without dreading the simple act of putting my feet on the floor. So I created a detailed savings plan. I took on additional tutoring jobs after school and on weekends. I cut my already minimal expenses even further, shopping only sales and using coupons for everything. I sold some of my remaining family heirlooms, including my mother's china set that I had hoped to pass down to Marcus's future wife. Slowly, painfully, the savings account grew. About 6 months ago, Marcus suggested that I add him to the account as a joint holder. He was concerned about what would happen if I had a medical emergency and needed someone to access my funds quickly. It made sense, and I appreciated his thoughtfulness. When we went to the bank together to add his name, he put his arm around me and said, "I just want to make sure you are always taking care of Mom. You have done so much for me all these years." The account grew steadily over those 18 months. 700 here, 300 there, sometimes just $50 when that was all I could manage. Each deposit brought me closer to my goal and closer to a pain-free future. By the time I scheduled the surgery for the following Tuesday, I had managed to save $7,800. I was so close to my goal, and the surgery was finally going to happen. Sunday evening, I sat at my small kitchen table with a cup of tea and my savings account statement spread before me. The final payment was due Monday afternoon, and I wanted to double-check everything one more time. The surgery was scheduled for Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock, and I had never been more ready for anything in my life. When I logged into my online banking account, I had to refresh the page twice before I believed what I was seeing. The balance showed $4,700 instead of the $7,800 I expected. $3,000 had been withdrawn on Friday afternoon at 2:37 p.m. My hands began shaking as I scrolled through the transaction details. The withdrawal had been made at an ATM near the airport. I had never been to that location, and I certainly had not authorized any withdrawal. My first thought was fraud, and I immediately called the bank's emergency number. After 20 minutes on hold and another 15 minutes explaining the situation, the representative confirmed that the withdrawal had been made using a valid debit card linked to the account. Since Marcus was the only other person with access to the account, I called him immediately. The phone rang and rang before going to voicemail. His cheerful recorded message suddenly sounded different to me, almost mocking. I left a message asking him to call me back immediately about an urgent banking issue. Then I paced around my small kitchen, checking my phone every few minutes, trying to convince myself that there had to be a reasonable explanation. When Marcus finally called back 3 hours later, his voice sounded strange. There was background noise I could not quite identify, and he seemed distracted and hurried. When I asked him about the withdrawal, there was a long pause before he answered. "Oh, that. Yeah, Mom, I had to borrow some money for an unexpected emergency. I meant to call you, but things got crazy. I will put it back before your surgery, I promise. Do not worry about anything." I pressed him for details about this emergency, but he remained vague. He kept saying he would explain everything later, that he was dealing with the situation now, and that everything would be fine. Something in his tone was completely wrong. In 26 years, Marcus had never lied to me, but every instinct I had was screaming that he was not telling me the truth. I barely slept that night. Every hour I checked my phone for messages and logged into my bank account, hoping to see the money returned. By morning, the balance remained the same. Worse, I kept replaying our conversation in my head, analyzing every word, every pause, every inflection. The Marcus I knew would have been frantic with worry about taking my surgery money. The Marcus I knew would have driven straight over to explain everything in person. This person I had spoken with was someone I did not recognize. Monday morning at 6 a.m., I checked my account again with my heart pounding. The balance now showed $2,700. Another $2,000 had been withdrawn Sunday evening at 11:23 p.m. again from the same airport location. I was now missing $5,100 with less than 9 hours until the payment deadline. I called Marcus immediately, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I called 5 more times with the same result. Panic was setting in as I realized that my surgery, the goal I had worked toward for 18 months, was about to slip away. The hospital required full payment by 3 p.m. or the surgery would be canceled and I would go back on a waiting list that could mean 6 more months of constant pain. I threw on clothes and drove to Marcus's apartment complex. My knee was screaming with every step, but I climbed the 2 flights to his door and pounded on it for 10 minutes. Finally, his elderly neighbor came out and told me she had seen him leave Friday evening with a large suitcase looking like he was going on a trip. When I asked his landlord, the man confirmed that Marcus had mentioned taking a sudden vacation and would be gone for about a week. I tried calling Sarah, but her number had been disconnected. When I called his workplace, the receptionist cheerfully informed me that Marcus had requested vacation time starting Friday and would not be back until the following Monday. As I sat in my car outside his empty apartment, the full reality hit me like a physical blow. My son had stolen my surgery money and gone on vacation. The person I had trusted more than anyone in the world had deliberately taken the money he knew I needed to end years of constant pain. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone as I called the hospital to ask about payment options. The conversation with the billing department was brief and devastating. They were sympathetic but firm about their policies. Without full payment by 3 p.m., my surgery would be canceled. The next available slot with the same surgeon would not be for at least 6 months, possibly longer. They suggested I apply for a medical loan or see if family members could help with the remaining amount. I had no family members with that kind of money. My siblings were dealing with their own financial struggles, and I had always been too proud to ask for help anyway. The medical loan applications I submitted online were all rejected within hours due to my limited income and lack of significant assets. By 2 p.m., I was sitting in my car outside the hospital crying harder than I had cried since my divorce. I drove home in a fog of disbelief and rage. 26 years of sacrifice, 26 years of putting Marcus's needs before my own, 26 years of working extra hours and denying myself basic comforts, and this was how it ended. My son had stolen from me without a second thought, had lied to my face, and had left me in agonizing pain while he enjoyed a vacation with my money. But as I sat on my couch looking at old photo albums filled with pictures of Marcus as a child, something inside me began to shift. The initial shock and devastation were giving way to something I had rarely allowed myself to feel: pure, righteous anger. I contacted the bank and demanded detailed information about every transaction Marcus had made. The customer service representative was incredibly helpful once I explained the situation. She pulled up records showing that the $5,000 had been withdrawn in 3 separate transactions, all at the same airport ATM. Additionally, there had been a $400 purchase at a travel agency near the airport Friday afternoon. The bank's security cameras had captured images of all transactions, and they clearly showed Marcus making the withdrawals alone, smiling and looking completely relaxed. I asked to speak with someone in the fraud department. The specialist I spoke with was sympathetic and informative. She explained that even though it was a joint account, the pattern of deposits and the fact that all the money had come from my paychecks could be used to build a case for unauthorized use. She asked if I wanted to file a formal complaint, which could result in the transactions being reversed, and Marcus facing potential criminal charges for theft. For the first time in days, I felt a spark of hope. I asked her to begin the investigation immediately and to flag Marcus's debit card for any suspicious activity. She also suggested I monitor his social media accounts if possible, as people often post evidence of their activities online without thinking about the consequences. I had never been active on social media, but I created a Facebook account that evening specifically to look for Marcus. What I found made my blood boil. His profile was set to public, and he had been posting photos from Cabo San Lucas since Saturday morning. The pictures showed him at expensive restaurants, lounging by resort pools, and posing with a blonde woman I had never seen before. Definitely not Sarah. One photo showed him holding up a large margarita with the caption, "Living our best life in paradise." Another showed an expensive seafood dinner with the comment, "When you decide to treat yourself right." A third photo featured him wearing a watch I had never seen before, standing next to the mystery woman by an infinity pool with the caption, "Sometimes you have to take the leap and follow your dreams." The comments from his friends were even more infuriating, people congratulating him on finally taking a real vacation and asking how he could afford such a nice trip. Marcus had responded to several comments saying things like, "Saved up for this for months," and "You only live once, right?" As I scrolled through photo after photo of my son enjoying an extravagant vacation funded by my surgery money, I felt something I had never experienced before. For 26 years, I had been a devoted, self-sacrificing mother. I had always put Marcus's needs first, always forgiven his mistakes, always made excuses for his shortcomings. But sitting there in my small living room, my knee throbbing with pain that would continue for at least 6 more months, I realized that I was done being a victim. The bank investigation revealed that Marcus had spent a total of $5,100 over 3 days. The travel agency purchase had been for round-trip tickets to Cabo San Lucas for 2 people departing Friday evening and returning the following Friday. The resort reservation was under Marcus Williams and guest at a 5-star oceanfront property that cost over $400 per night. I spent the rest of Monday evening researching my options and planning my next move. The bank fraud specialist had given me detailed information about the investigation process and what evidence they would need. I gathered every piece of documentation I had showing that the money in the account came entirely from my income. I printed out Marcus's social media posts showing him spending money extravagantly while claiming he was dealing with an emergency. By Tuesday morning, I had made a decision that would have been unthinkable to me just days before. I was going to fight back, and I was going to make sure Marcus faced real consequences for what he had done to me. Tuesday morning brought an unexpected sense of clarity and purpose. Instead of wallowing in self-pity about my canceled surgery, I woke up feeling more focused than I had in years. The helpless, devastated woman from the day before had been replaced by someone I barely recognized, a woman who was ready to take control of her own life and demand justice. I called the bank as soon as they opened and spoke again with the fraud specialist. She had reviewed all the documentation I had provided and confirmed that I had an excellent case for recovering my money. More importantly, she explained that, as the account holder who had contributed all the funds, I had the right to freeze the account immediately and block all future transactions. The process was surprisingly simple. Since I could prove that Marcus had taken money without my permission for purposes, I had not approved the bank could treat it as unauthorized use, even though he was technically a joint account holder. They would freeze his debit card immediately and reverse all the charges made in Mexico within 10 business days. But the specialist gave me an option that made my heart race with anticipation. Rather than freezing the account immediately, I could wait and have it frozen at a specific time of my choosing. This would allow Marcus to continue believing he had access to the money until the exact moment I decided to cut him off. She suggested this strategy because it would create a clear record of his continued unauthorized use and strengthen the case for prosecution. I asked her to monitor the account for new transaction attempts and call me the moment Marcus tried to use the card. Then I settled in to wait. Based on his social media posts, Marcus was planning something special for Tuesday evening. He had posted a photo of an expensive restaurant with the caption, "Tonight is going to be amazing," and tagged the mystery woman whose name appeared to be Jessica. At 3:15 p.m. Mexico time, my phone rang. Marcus was attempting to charge $867 at an upscale steakhouse in Cabo San Lucas. The bank representative asked if I wanted to authorize the transaction. I told her to proceed with freezing the account effective immediately. Within minutes, my phone rang again. This time, it was Marcus, and I could hear the panic in his voice before he even spoke. Background noise confirmed he was in a restaurant, and I could hear a woman's voice in the background sounding increasingly agitated. "Mom, there is something wrong with my card. The bank says the account is frozen. Can you call them and fix this? We are at dinner, and this is really embarrassing." For the first time in our conversation, my voice was completely calm and controlled. "There is nothing wrong with the bank, Marcus. I froze the account. I know where you are, I know what you have been doing, and I know exactly how much of my surgery money you have stolen." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. When Marcus finally spoke, his voice was completely different. Gone was the casual confidence he had displayed in our previous conversations. Now he sounded like a child who had been caught in a terrible lie. "Mom, I can explain everything. This is not what it looks like. I was going to pay you back before your surgery, I swear. I just wanted to do something nice for Jessica because she has been going through a hard time, and I thought I could replace the money before you needed it." I let him talk for several minutes, listening to excuse after excuse, promise after promise, justification after rationalization. He told me about how hard he had been working, how he deserved a vacation, how Jessica had threatened to break up with him if he did not do something romantic, how he had been planning to ask his boss for an advance to pay me back. When he finally ran out of words, I responded with a calmness that surprised even me. "Marcus, I have been in constant pain for 2 years while saving for surgery. You knew exactly what that money was for. You knew exactly when I needed it, and you chose to steal it anyway so you could impress some woman I have never even met." I could hear Jessica's voice in the background, clearly upset about the situation. Marcus was trying to calm her down while continuing to plead with me to unfreeze the account. He described how humiliated he felt when the card was declined in front of a restaurant full of people, how the manager had been called over, how other diners were staring at them. But for the first time in 26 years, Marcus's embarrassment was not my problem to solve. His poor choices were not my responsibility to fix. His lies were not my burden to bear. I listened to his panic with a sense of satisfaction I had never allowed myself to feel before. Over the next 3 days, Marcus called me dozens of times. Each conversation revealed more details about just how badly his situation was deteriorating, and I found myself feeling genuinely satisfied by the consequences he was facing. His first call Wednesday morning was barely coherent. Jessica had discovered that the money for their vacation had been stolen from his mother's surgery fund, and she was absolutely disgusted. She had booked herself on the next flight back to the United States, leaving Marcus alone in Mexico with no money and no support. The hotel was demanding immediate payment for the remaining nights, and without a valid credit card, they were threatening to evict him and hold his belongings. Marcus had spent Tuesday night sleeping in the hotel lobby, too embarrassed to contact friends or family for help. He had tried explaining the situation to other hotel guests, hoping someone might lend him money, but his story sounded so outrageous that most people assumed he was running some kind of scam. The restaurant incident had been even worse than I initially realized. When his card was declined for the large dinner bill, the manager assumed they were attempting to dine and dash. Hotel security had been called, and Marcus and Jessica were detained for over an hour while the situation was sorted out. Other guests had taken photos and videos of the commotion, and Marcus was mortified to discover that footage of his humiliation was already circulating online. By Wednesday afternoon, Marcus had managed to contact some friends back home, but their reactions were not what he had expected. Word had spread quickly about what he had done, and most people were horrified that he had stolen his mother's surgery money for a vacation. His carefully constructed image as a successful, responsible adult was crumbling as people realized what kind of person he really was. His workplace had also learned about the situation. One of his coworkers had seen the social media posts and put together the timeline. When Marcus failed to return to work as scheduled, and word got out about the theft, his supervisor called to inform him that his employment was being terminated immediately. They could not have someone with such serious character issues representing their company. The bank investigation had proceeded exactly as the specialist predicted. All of Marcus's transactions in Mexico were being reversed, but the process would take 10 full business days. In the meantime, his accounts remained frozen, leaving him completely unable to access any money. He was stuck in Mexico with mounting hotel bills, no transportation home, and no way to pay for anything. Marcus's attempts to change his flight were unsuccessful because the airline required payment for any modifications, and he had no valid payment method. He was essentially trapped in Cabo San Lucas until either the bank investigation concluded or someone back home agreed to help him financially. But perhaps the most devastating consequence was the complete loss of his social circle. The friends who had congratulated him on his vacation were now posting comments expressing their disgust and disbelief. Several people shared stories about their own family members who had needed medical procedures, making Marcus's actions seem even more heartless. His social media accounts, which had been filled with vacation photos just days before, were now flooded with criticism and condemnation. Jessica had been particularly vocal about her experience. She posted a detailed account of the vacation disaster on her own social media, describing how she had been deceived into participating in a trip funded by stolen money intended for an elderly woman's surgery. Her post went viral locally, ensuring that Marcus's reputation was destroyed not just among his existing friends, but throughout the broader community. By Thursday, Marcus had been forced to contact distant relatives he barely knew, begging for help getting home. Most of them refused once they learned the details of his situation. The few who might have helped were put off by the amounts of money involved and the serious legal implications of what he had done. I received updates about all of these developments through various sources. The bank kept me informed about the investigation progress. and Marcus's increasingly desperate attempts to access money. Some mutual acquaintances reached out to share what they had heard about the situation. Marcus's former coworkers contacted me to express their support and disbelief about what had happened. With each new piece of information, I felt more confident that I had made the right decision. For years, I had protected Marcus from the consequences of his poor choices, always stepping in to help him avoid discomfort or embarrassment. But this time, he was experiencing the full weight of his actions, and it was clear that the lesson was one he desperately needed to learn. The bank investigation concluded exactly as promised. Within 10 business days, all of the stolen money was returned to my account with additional compensation for the inconvenience and distress the situation had caused. The bank also implemented new security measures to prevent similar incidents in the future and provided me with enhanced fraud protection services at no charge. Marcus's return from Mexico was as humiliating as his time there had been. He had eventually convinced a distant cousin to wire him enough money for a basic flight home, but only after agreeing to repay the amount immediately and promising to seek counseling for his behavior. The cousin had made it clear that this was a one-time assistance and that Marcus should never contact him again. When Marcus finally arrived back in the United States, he discovered that his problems were far from over. His apartment lease had defaulted due to missed rent payments while his accounts were frozen. His landlord had already begun eviction proceedings and was demanding immediate payment of all outstanding amounts plus penalties. With no job and no access to credit, Marcus was forced to move his belongings into a storage unit and stay with relatives who barely tolerated his presence. The employment termination had broader consequences than Marcus initially realized. His former supervisor had been honest about the reasons for his dismissal when contacted by potential new employers. Word spread quickly through the local tech community about what he had done, making it nearly impossible for him to find comparable work. Several job interviews were canceled when companies learned about his background, and others rejected his applications without explanation. The legal ramifications were also becoming clear. The bank had filed a formal report about the unauthorized transactions, and the district attorney's office was reviewing the case for potential prosecution. While I ultimately decided not to pursue criminal charges, the investigation created a permanent record that would follow Marcus for years to come. His social relationships remained damaged beyond repair. The friends who had distanced themselves during the Mexico incident showed no interest in reconciliation. His dating prospects were similarly affected as word of what he had done spread through social networks and dating apps. The story of a man who stole his mother's surgery money for a vacation was too shocking and memorable to be forgotten quickly. Meanwhile, my own situation improved dramatically. The hospital was able to reschedule my surgery for just 2 weeks after the original date, thanks to a cancellation and the administration's sympathy for my circumstances. The medical staff were particularly attentive, having heard about my situation through the hospital's social worker network. The surgery itself was even more successful than anticipated. My surgeon commented that my positive attitude and determination had contributed to better than expected outcomes. The physical therapy process was challenging but rewarding, and within months, I was experiencing the first pain-free days I had enjoyed in years. More importantly, the entire experience had taught me valuable lessons about self-respect and boundaries that I had never learned in 26 years of motherhood. I realized that my pattern of endless sacrifice and enabling had not been helping Marcus become a better person. Instead, it had taught him that he could take advantage of my love without consequences. The new Elaine who emerged from this experience was someone I barely recognized but genuinely liked. I was more assertive in all areas of my life, more selective about who I trusted, and more protective of my own well-being. I developed friendships with people who appreciated my boundaries rather than trying to exploit my generosity. Marcus made several attempts to reconcile, but I maintained firm boundaries about the terms of any future relationship. I required him to complete financial counseling, find stable employment, and demonstrate genuine accountability for his actions over an extended period. Most importantly, I made it clear that any future relationship would be built on mutual respect rather than my unconditional enabling. Today, 18 months after that devastating discovery, I am a completely different person than I was before Marcus stole my surgery money. At 55, I am stronger, more confident, and more at peace with myself than I have ever been in my adult life. The physical pain that had dominated my existence for years is gone, replaced by energy and mobility that allows me to enjoy activities I had forgotten I loved. The surgery recovery exceeded all expectations. Physical therapy became not just a medical necessity, but a source of personal empowerment. Working with other patients who had overcome their own challenges taught me that recovery is about much more than healing physical damage. It is about reclaiming control over your own life and refusing to accept limitations imposed by others or by circumstance. Meeting other patients during therapy sessions introduced me to a community I never knew existed. Many of them shared stories of family betrayals and personal setbacks that made me realize I was not alone in having trusted people who ultimately harmed me. These connections evolved into genuine friendships based on mutual support and shared understanding rather than obligation or guilt. My perspective on relationships has fundamentally changed. I no longer believe that love requires endless sacrifice or that being a good mother means enabling harmful behavior. The guilt I carried for years about setting boundaries with Marcus has been replaced by confidence that protecting myself ultimately benefits both of us. Love without self-respect is not really love at all. It is a form of codependency that helps no one. The financial independence I have achieved extends far beyond recovering the stolen surgery money. Learning to advocate for myself with the bank, insurance companies, and medical providers taught me skills I never realized I possessed. I have negotiated better terms for my accounts, secured additional insurance coverage, and even received a promotion at work based on the assertiveness skills I developed during this crisis. Marcus has made progress toward rebuilding his life, but it has been a slow and difficult process entirely of his own making. He found employment at a smaller company for significantly less money than his previous position, and his career prospects remain limited by his damaged reputation. He has completed the counseling I required and has demonstrated more consistent accountability for his actions. Our relationship today exists on terms I never would have imagined possible before this experience. We have occasional contact, but it is based on mutual respect rather than my unconditional availability. Marcus understands that rebuilding trust requires sustained effort over time, not just apologies and promises. He has never again asked me for financial assistance, knowing that those days are permanently over. The most profound change has been in how I view my own worth and needs. For decades, I defined my value through what I could give others, particularly Marcus. Now I understand that my needs matter just as much as anyone else's, and that taking care of myself is not selfish, but necessary. I have learned to distinguish between helping others and enabling them, between love and codependency, between kindness and weakness. I have also discovered interests and capabilities that were buried under years of financial stress and caretaking responsibilities. With my knee pain resolved and my financial situation more secure, I have started taking art classes, joined a hiking group, and even begun planning that trip to Ireland I dreamed about for so many years. These activities have introduced me to new friends who know me as Elaine, the individual, not Elaine, the self-sacrificing mother. The experience taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to allow them to face the full consequences of their choices. By protecting Marcus from discomfort for so many years, I had prevented him from developing the character and judgment he needed to make good decisions. The harsh consequences he faced in Mexico and afterward were exactly what he needed to begin growing into a genuinely responsible adult. Perhaps most importantly, I learned that it is never too late to change the patterns that have defined your life. At 54, I completely transformed my understanding of myself and my relationships. The woman who allowed her surgery money to be stolen no longer exists. In her place is someone who protects her own well-being as fiercely as she once protected others. I spent 26 years teaching my son how to walk through life. It took one frozen bank card to teach him how to stand on his own. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is allowing them to discover their own strength through facing their own consequences. And sometimes the greatest gift we give ourselves is finally putting our own well-being first. The journey from victim to victor is not always easy, but it is always worth taking. I am proof that it is possible to reclaim your power, rebuild your life, and create the respect you deserve, no matter how long you have been accepting less than you are worth. If you have experienced similar betrayals or struggles with setting boundaries, please share your story in the comments below. Your experiences could help others who are facing similar challenges. If this story inspired you or gave you hope, please hit that like button to let me know it resonated with you. Subscribe to this channel for more stories of resilience, recovery, and personal transformation. And please share this video with anyone who might need to hear that it is never too late to stand up for yourself and demand the respect you deserve. Thank you for listening to my story and for being part of this community of people who believe in the power of personal growth and positive change. Remember that your worth is not determined by what others think of you or how they treat you. You have the power to create the life and relationships you truly deserve. Wishing you strength, courage, and the determination to never settle for less than you are worth.